By late war, the British were bolting 17-pounder guns onto just about anything that would take the weight. Purpose-built tank designs like Comet and Centurion were coming, but stopgap solutions were required until they entered service. You might know about Firefly on the Sherman chassis and Challenger on the Cromwell, but much earlier came the Archer on the Valentine. And Battlefront has a plastic kit of it for Flames of War. Join me as we take a look at Archer, a 17-pounder SP gun design from as far back as 1943 that looks crazy, but soldiered on even after the end of the war. This is BBX78, Battlefront's Archer anti-tank troop for Flames of War. This late-war box set contains parts to build 4 Archer 17-pounder SP guns. This kit was part of the Bulge British release for the game, which covers from September 1944 to the end of the war. As well as the troop box, there are Archers included in the Comet Armoured Squadron box set. You get 2 in the set. Archer is an unusual vehicle, an obsolete Valentine tank chassis with a 17-pounder anti-tank gun mounted firing backwards over the engine deck. While effective, the 17-pounder anti-tank gun was heavy and required a vehicle to move it. The Valentine was obsolete as a gun tank, but still tooled up for production. An up-engine version of the chassis was chosen as the basis for a self-propelled mount for the gun. Of course, the Valentine chassis had been used before, with the 25-pounder gun to become the Bishop and an experimental 6-pounder SPG. Despite production starting in mid-1943, the Archer didn't enter service until October 1944. The gun was mounted onto the hull facing backwards over the engine deck. The mounting allowed 11 degrees of traverse to each side and elevation from +15 to -7 degrees. Mounting the gun at the front of the chassis facing back over the engine deck avoided a long barrel overhang, keeping the overall vehicle length down. Archer had a crew of 4: driver, gunner, loader and commander. They all operated in the open-topped fighting compartment. The myth is the recoiling gun's breech would decapitate the driver, but while space was tight, it wasn't that tight. In action, the driver usually manned his position to drive away quickly after engaging a target. As an SP gun, Archer was manned by Royal Artillery crews. It operated in northwest Europe and Italy. Production ceased at war's end, with 655 of the ordered 800 vehicles produced. The vehicle continued to serve into the 1950s. Egypt and Jordan also operated the type, with Egyptian Archers facing off against British and French forces during the Suez crisis in 1956. If we look at the assembly diagram, you can see the parts count is pretty low. Fitting the superstructure was a bit fiddly. It works best if you come straight down onto the hull. The troop box comes with parts to build 4 vehicles, as well as a decal sheet. There are also some crew figures. Let's look at the plastic. The parts come on a single sprue of green plastic. Overall, parts count is low, and the parts are well detailed with sharp moulding. This is the upper hull. Some of these shapes, like the fenders and engine deck, will be familiar from the Valentine kit. There's some good engine deck grille detail here, plus an exhaust to the right-hand side. In the fighting compartment area, you can see the gun trunnion and some ready rounds, as well as the commander's seat. The lower hull is keyed to make sure you fit the tracks correctly. Again, the hull angles here are very reminiscent of the Valentine. The main gun is the 17-pounder ordnance quick-firing gun. This is a 3-inch gun with a long barrel and rounded muzzle brake. 17-pounder had a relatively long recoil stroke. Note the gun here has 2 recoil buffers, over and under the gun, very different from the towed gun. This part is the gun breech and recoil guard. This fits onto the main gun piece, and there's a slot and post arrangement to make sure you assemble these correctly. What there isn't is a guide to make sure you glue it into the trunnion the right way up. Even the assembly guide on Battlefront's website gets this wrong. The breech should be visible when the gun's installed. The legs of the recoil guard should be towards the bottom of the hull, with just the end of the recoil guard facing upwards. The interior of the fighting compartment here goes inside the lower hull. There are some good mating surfaces here. Make sure you match the slope of the hull against the slope of the mating surfaces on this piece to position it correctly. Tracks are one-piece parts. These are very recognisable from the base Valentine. Each bogie assembly has 3 wheels, a large wheel on one bell crank and 2 smaller ones on another. This was John Carden's bright idea to modify the existing Horstman suspension to further minimise bounce. Each track has 2 of these bogies. Track detail is simple, but there's enough here for it to look good. The large circular central drum on the drive sprocket is actually the braking system for the tracks, mounted outside the hull under an armoured housing. The superstructure fits onto the upper hull, forming the walls of the fighting compartment. Take care fitting this piece. Some fender parts on the hull interlock with this piece, so be careful to get this sitting right to minimise gaps. I screwed this up on my first one, so just a heads up to be careful here. The slot on the front of this part is for some spare track links. The slot makes fitting these easy. Lastly is the gun shield. This slides on over the gun and attaches to the superstructure. It's not immediately obvious, but the main joining surfaces are actually the top few millimetres of the rear of the superstructure. So those are the parts for the Archer SP gun kit from Battlefront. It builds up into a nice kit. The engineering is good, but there are a couple of gotchas to keep in mind. Take care with positioning the superstructure on the hull, making sure to align the parts that interconnect with the hull piece. And when placing the gun shield, check where the shield and superstructure make contact when you're applying the glue. Other than that, this is a good kit of an unusual vehicle. It's nice to have it in plastic. How will Archer work on the table? Let's check out the unit card. The Archer anti-tank troop is a tank unit, available as a support choice for British Bulge forces in late war. Motivation is a confident 4+, as is their skill. These are well-trained and experienced Royal Artillery crews. However, assault and counterattack are both 6. This is an open-topped SP gun. It's not designed for close combat, and I think the crews knew that. They're careful, hit on a 4+. Armour is 2 front, side and rear, but the open top gives a top rating of 0. Tactical move is 10 inches or 25 centimetres, and crosses are 3+, all fairly average. The 17-pounder main gun has a 36-inch or 90 centimetre range, and halted rate of fire 2. The gun can't fire if it moved. The vehicle is designed to shoot from ambush and then scoot to the next firing position. Anti-tank is 15 with a 3+ firepower. The 15 comes from ammunition improvements in the late stages of the war, with new penetrator rounds becoming available. The special rules are no HE, which gives a +1 to hit for firing at infantry and gun teams, and rear firing. Rear firing means archers can only target vehicles fully behind the shooting team. This reflects Archer's limited traverse for the awkward rear-facing gun mount. So, Archer is a long-range, hard-hitting but vulnerable anti-tank weapon designed for ambush. The Archer anti-tank troop is a support option for Bulge British units. You can take them in place of a troop of towed 17-pounder guns. There are options to field either 2 or 4 Archers, for 9 and 18 points respectively. That's 4.5 points each. It works out about 1 point per vehicle cheaper than taking the late war M10 Achilles with the same armament. To be honest, with better armour, better assault, a 50 caliber machine gun and a fully rotating turret, the M10 might be the better option. But Archer is a unique British vehicle. That might be enough to swing it. Anyway, that's the Archer anti-tank troop for Flames of War. It's a nice kit with a low parts count and only a couple of tricky spots during assembly. Be sure to dry fit the superstructure and make sure you glue the gun in up the right way. It's a fun option to have, but I'm not sure you wouldn't be better with the towed guns at 1 point less or the more mobile M10 for 1 point more. That said, a pair of these appearing in ambush at the right place at the right time could do a lot of damage. I hope you found this look at Archer useful. If you did, like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. What do you think about the Archer? Is it just a historical oddity, or is it a useful weapon system in a late war British Army? Are you going to take them? How do you plan to use them? Thanks for watching. See you next time.